While missiles fly over the Middle East, the real explosion for India might happen at your local petrol pump and your grocery bills. As the US and Israel confrontation with Iran escalate to unprecedented level, India finds itself in a real stake balancing act. Today, we indicate how the war thousands of kilometers away is threatening 90% of our oil supply, risking the safety of 9 million Indians in the Gulf, and why your portfolio is suddenly seeing red. So today we are talking about the Iran-Israel conflict and the ripple effect in India. As of the early 2026, the ongoing conflict involving the United States, Israel, and Iran has created a significant energy and economic shocks for India. Because India rely on the Persian Gulf for nearly 88% of its oil and 91% of its liquefied petroleum gas (LPG) gas. The instability of the region has direct consequences for Indian household and the industry. The primary impact are categorized below. First of all, the energy crisis and the LPG shortage. The closure of the description of the Strait of Hormuz, a critical maritime checkpoint, has severely choked India's fuel supply. Cooking gas retainings. The government has been forced to prioritize household LPG over the commercial use. In city like Mumbai, refill delay range from 2 to 8 days, and mandatory 25-day gap between cylinder booking has been enforced to prevent hoardings. Commercial shutdown. Approximately 20% of the restaurants in Mumbai and Delhi and 170 tile factory in the Gujarat have rapidly shut down due to the gas shortage. The price spikes. The oil price have surged past $120 to $150 per barrel, leading to the high petrol and diesel cost. Through the Indian government recently cut excise duty by rupees 10 per liter to the soften the blow. The supply crunch has led the surge in the LPG prices and scarcity of the cooking gas forced many rural households to revert to the traditional cooking methods such as using the firewoods and biomass. This shift back the traditional fuel is having severe impact in the rural women. The hazardous health consequences. Cooking with the fuel, cow dung and coal release high level of the toxic smokes, which cause severe respiratory problems, include asthma, lung damage, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And we are failing to follow the SDG goals also. Physical derogatory and time poverty. Women are forced to spend hundreds of hours annually collecting firewoods, which is physically a strenuous task. This reduces the time they have for other productive work and increase their exposure to the toxic smoke. Increased vulnerability. The reliance on the collection of the biomass fuel often falls heavily on women, who also wear who also bear the burden of managing household with a little to no help. Compact on the children. The smoke from the traditional chulha impact the children's developing lungs, who are particularly vulnerable to the deteriorating air quality in the poorly ventilated homes. Safety risk. The daily search of the firewoods often forces women to travel to forest, exposing them to the risks such as wildlife encounters in mainly the hilly areas like Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, Assam, Meghalaya are very risky for the tigers and other wildlife. It also increases the human and animal conflicts. The situation has caused a significant increase in the demands of the firewoods in the regions such as Najimabad. It has also impacted institutional cookings, with the midday meal schemes for children under the PM Poshan initiatives reverting to the firewoods due to the LPG crunch, disproportionately affecting the women cooks. The current exodus of the migrant worker from the major Indian city like Surat, Mumbai and Delhi is primarily driven by the severe LPG cooking crisis triggered by the ongoing conflict in West Asia. While jobs are often still available and the inability to afford or even find cooking fuels has made daily survival in the metro impossible for low-wage earners. In the black market, the price of the standard 14.2 kg cylinder have reportedly surged to the 3,200 to 4,000, up from 1,000. The small 5 kg cylinder used by many migrants without formal document have jumped from 500 to over 2,000, Lack of the alternatives. Many migrant workers live in the rented share accommodations where landlords have prohibited to use of the firewood due to smoke damage, the induction cooktops due to soaring electricity cuts. Economic unviability. For the workers earn roughly 400 rupees. The cost of a single day fuel now equal to the exceeds their entire daily wages, leaving nothing for food, rent or remittance. Due to this, many migrant laborers are leaving the major city, and then the economic and trade disruptions. A prolonged Iran-Israel war is pushing the Indian rupee toward the potential 100 per USD mark due to the rising oil prices. Widening trade deficit, a foreign capital outflow, which analysis warning it could be a credible stress scenario. The conflict has already driven the rupee post 93, marking a historic low driven by the immediate inflationary fears. The key impact on the Indian rupee, significant weakening. The rupee has already fallen significantly, approaching 94 plus, with the forecast suggesting it could weaken past 100 if the conflict persists. Rising oil prices. As India imports 85% of its crude oil, conflict in the Gulf pushes up prices, increase the demand for dollar and devaluing the rupee. Foreign capital outflow. Global investor may shift fund to safer assets, putting immense selling pressure on the rupees and Indian equities. Inflation and deficit. A weaker rupee increase the cost of import oil, electronic edible oils, fueling domestic inflation and widening the current account deficit. Agriculture and fertilizers. India import a massive amount of LNG for fertilizer production. Supply disruptions have forced fertilizer plant to operate at only 70% capacity, threatening crop yield and increasing the government supply subsidy burdens. Then the Iran-Israel war significantly pressure India forex reserve, which fall by the USD 30 billions in just 3 weeks due to the high price oil prices and the weakening rupee. A capital outflow. As a major energy importer, India forced rising import bills, forcing the RBI to deploy dollar reserve to stabilize the rupee. Impact on the forex reserve and economy. Rapid depletions. Reserve initially at the USD 728 billions fall to the USD 698 billions as the RBI intervened to support the weakening rupees. Rupee volatility. The rupee dropped to record low, necessitating intervening to curb depreciations. Oil import cost. Rising crude oil prices surging 9 to 10%. The supply concern required more USD to maintain essential energy import. Capital outflow. Global risk evasion often promote the foreign investor to pull fund for emerging market like India, adding the currency pressure. Reduce remittances. Escalating West Asia conflict could disrupt foreign remittances, further impacting the current account balance. Standard exports. Major maritime routes are restricted, leaving roughly 40,000 ton of the Indian basmati rice stocks at the port on in transit. Then the diaspora and remittances. The Iran-Israel conflict poses severe risk over the 9 million Indian migrants in the Gulf, threatening a triple threat: a job losses, physical danger, and the potential reputations. Rising risk of the conflict had promoted potential evacuations, increased travel costs, and disrupted livelihood due to the business shutdowns, particularly affecting low-income workers depend on the daily wages and remittances. Key impact on the Indian migrant laborers, job insecurity and the reverse migrants. As a businesses reduce operation due to the rising operation cost and the instability, many Indian workers face wage losses, layoffs and need to return to home. Physical safety risk. The escalation of the conflict into the Gulf region put workers directly in the path of the potential missile strikes and increase security crackdowns. Remittance disruptions. A prolonged conflict could disrupt, halt, and reduce the $50 billion in annual remittances, heavily impacting family in the Kerala, Uttar Pradesh, and Bihar. Evacuations and travel challenges. Travels to the from the Gulf in the hampered by airspaces, restriction, and higher cost, complicating efforts to move workers to safely. Rising cost of living. Workers face high inflation and shortage of essential goods like cooking gas, particularly in UAE and surrounding area. Then the strategic and geopolitical challenges. The balancing act, India is struggling to maintain its strategic autonomy. While the US is a key partner, India has historical tie with the Iran and interest in the Chahbar port project. Naval intervention. Under the Operation Sankalp, the Indian Navy has been placed on standby to escort merchant tankers carrying critical energy supply through the contested waters. Current stated to migrate the crisis, India urgently looking to diversify its energy sources, increasing intake from the US Gulf Coast and Australia to absorb the losses from Qatar and Iran.